Good evening, everyone. I'm Ankit, and you're watching the Indian Express analysis, which goes live every day at 4 p.m. on StudyIQ IAS English channel. Let me change the sound setting here first. Give me a minute. Yeah. Now, good evening, everyone. We are discussing the Indian Express analysis for 12th of May, and we are going to discuss important articles that have picked up from the newspaper. We'll have picked up 6 articles from today, but it stretches way beyond 60-65 slides, so I don't think so we'll be able to cover 6 articles. I'll try my best. Let's see how much we are able to cover the articles. Okay. We'll start our today's discussion by understanding the various nuances, details of what actually is a ceasefire. And why are we discussing ceasefire? Because India and Pakistan announced stoppage of all military actions against terrorists, against each other's against army on Saturday. In this regard, we are going to understand the various nuances, details about what is a ceasefire, right? Now, these kind of articles, these are important from GS paper 2 perspective, because ceasefire essentially is what is in bilateral agreement with two countries to end hostilities or end violence, right? So, this is an agreement between two nations, therefore, the relevant topic would be GS paper 2. In the second article, we'll be understanding how and why has IMF extended loan to Pakistan. What has been the cause of concern of India? Under which category has IMF extended loan to Pakistan? Now, we took a cursory view of what is an IMF, how this IMF works. I'll try to build upon that and add much more in detail about how IMF gives certain loans to many countries, especially the ones who are facing balance of payment crisis. And we understand in terms of economy, Pakistan's economy has been stagnant for about a decade. It earlier was about 3 to 4% of India's, 3 to 4 times less than India's economy. Now it is approximately 11 times less of India's economy. So in that regard, how and why is IMF extending loan? We'll try to understand this in our today's discussion. This again is a relevant topic from GS paper 2 perspective, because IMF is what is a important intergovernmental organization originally known as a Bretton Woods institution, right? Now, in the third article, we'll understand the reasons why farmers in India, they usually prefer growing rice and wheat as against other crops like pulses, like millets, which probably are more remunerative in the market. But still, we see that the farmers in India majorly grow and they prefer growing two crops only, that is rice and wheat. So, we'll understand the reasons why. This is an article beautifully explained in the Indian Express Explain section, and we'll try to analyze those articles particularly from the perspective of our exam. Now, on the outset, you'd look at this article, you'll see this is relevant from economy perspective. But if you read this article properly, you'll see more and more science and tech versions and science and tech developments are given in this article. Therefore, in either case, GS paper 3, economy or science and tech, is the relevant paper for this newspaper. In the fourth article, we'll be understanding about a disease known as Nipah virus. Nipah virus is in news because a woman in Kerala was diagnosed with this virus, and therefore we are going to understand everything which is relevant from our exams perspective, particularly with respect to Nipah virus. Now, this again is a relevant paper from GS paper 3, that is the syllabus of science and tech, right? In the fifth article, we'll be understanding about a Turkish origin drones which was utilized extensively by Pakistan to target Indian military and civilian installations. This is a Songer drone, and this was highlighted in the press conference done by the military, especially by the wing commander Vyomika Singh. She highlighted that Pakistan relied on these kind of drones to attack Indian army and Indian civilian installations. So in that regard, we'll try to understand the features of these kind of drones, how they are different from the drones employed by India. And Indian army has categorically said that whether you use Turkish, whether you use Chinese or any other drone, it does not matter, we'll shoot them down. So this is the approach we are going to do in our today's discussion also. Whether it will be a Turkish origin drone, whether it will be a Chinese or Israeli origin drone, we'll try to understand each and everything that is relevant from our newspaper perspective. Also, this is relevant again from science and tech perspective. So these days, science and tech has been so much in demand, particularly because of the weapon systems, because of air defenses, because of the missiles that are used by both parties. Therefore, we are going to cover this article. And last article, if the time permits, we'll be understanding the Competition Commissions of India new definition regarding predatory pricing. In that regard, we'll understand what predatory pricing means, how it works, and also details regarding the regulator of the competition in Indian economy, that is the Competition Commission of India. Here the relevant paper, primarily GS paper 2 and GS paper 3, GS paper 2Y because of CCI and GS paper 3Y because of predatory pricing, and how predatory pricing affects the free market economy, right? So these are the 6 articles that we are going to discuss in our today's discussion. Now, the notes for this session will be as usual available on my Telegram channel, ATS Live. So if you haven't subscribed it already, please go subscribe it. I'll make sure to upload the notes after the session ends. Okay. So let us start our today's discussion, and I've borrowed the yesterday's newspaper, that is the Sunday's edition of Indian Express, to highlight you, because the newspaper, the front page of this newspaper, you can see the words only given here are ceasefire, and this actually symbolizes that the Indian Pakistani army, it announced ceasefire. And who announced it first? It was the US President Donald Trump, who said that after night-long negotiation, ceasefire have been achieved between India and Pakistan. So in this regard, let us try to understand the context of our today's discussion. Now, both of these armies have agreed to what is known as a ceasefire after the escalations that happened between the military last week. Now, on Saturday, India's Foreign Secretary Mr. Vikram Misri said that the Director General of Military Operations, who is a senior Lieutenant General rank officer in both India and Pakistani army, they called up each other, particularly the Pakistani DGMO called Indian DGMO at 3:35 p.m. and they agreed that both sides will stop all firing and military actions in land, in air and in sea from 5 p.m. Saturday onwards. Although after this ceasefire was achieved, many reported that drone sightings and loud explosions, they were heard and sought in the areas particularly near the borders of Jammu and Kashmir. So in this regard, what becomes important from our exams perspective? What actually does the word ceasefire means? Is it a formal agreement? Is it an informal understanding? How or what kind of an actions you expect both of these militaries to have, and what is the recourse in case one of the parties violate what is known as ceasefire, right? So in this regard, let us try to understand what is a ceasefire. Now, in terms of any important statute like UN-based statute or any other important international law, you will find no official definition anywhere mentioned of the word ceasefire. So how do we know what is ceasefire? In that regard, we need to understand what the experts are saying about it. Now, first definition of ceasefire we can understand from the book known as The Practical Guide to Humanitarian Law by a French thinker known as Francois Boucher-Saulnier. I don't understand if I've pronounced his name right, but this is the name of the person we are talking about. Now, according to him, the ceasefire, it is an agreement between nations who are involved in a conflict, and when they are trying to regulate this conflict in one way or the other, they try to terminate all military activity for a given length of time or for a given area. This is called as a ceasefire according to Francois Boucher-Saulnier. So it means termination of all military activity for a given length of time and for a given area. This is what is defined as a ceasefire according to this person. Then another person, Sidney D. Bailey, who is an author and expert in international affairs, he has quoted in Oxford Encyclopedia that suspension of acts of violence by military and paramilitary forces, usually resulting from the intervention of a third party, is called a ceasefire. So in that regard, if you understand or if you agree with the fact that US actually played the role of a third party here, then this actually calls for a ceasefire, because it means cessation of an act of violence by military, by paramilitary forces like BSF who are deployed in borders of India, or Pakistani Rangers who are deployed in Pakistani borders. These are called as ceasefire. Understood? So these are broadly two understanding on which we understand what is a ceasefire. Now let us understand what formally ceasefire means or what it does not mean. Now, for ceasefire can be either a formally documented agreement or can be even agreed upon verbally. This time, both of the DGMOs have agreed to a ceasefire orally, right? Now, ceasefire, it does not represent the end of hostilities. So, does it mean that India and Pakistan have achieved a ceasefire? Does it mean that the Kashmir conflict between the two countries have resolved, or does it mean the Indus Water Treaty or the abeyance of Indus Water Treaty has been ended? The answer is no. It only means that now both of these countries won't attack each other. Understood? Now it represents a truce. That means it can be a temporary suspension of hostilities in both international as well as non-international armed conflicts also. So even when two parties located in the same country, they are fighting, for example, a terrorist organization or a Naxali organization in India, or Indian armed forces like Indian CAPFs, even they can sign a ceasefire agreement saying that we can't attack each other. So this ceasefire does not mean that only the two nations or more than one nation needs to be involved. It can also include two bodies which are functioning in a particular country, right? And this also does not mean that it does not reflect a judicial end of state of war. It means the state of war has been paused, right? So it does not mean that the war has ended. So tomorrow if Russia and Ukraine signs a ceasefire agreement, it does not mean that the Russian and Ukrainian war has come to an end. It means that the war has been paused for a while. Like you're watching the video, you do not go back, you just pause the video for some time, go and have water, come back and then resume the video. This ceasefire basically means that only. Understood? Now I'll take your questions after this article, okay? Need not worry. Now, what does typical a ceasefire agreements deal with? We need to understand whenever two countries sign a formal agreement for ceasefire, it may include some of the things like what is the timing of commencement. So even if you see from the today's discussion, both of the countries highlighted that will stop attacking each other from 5 p.m. on Saturday onwards, right? So therefore, ceasefire agreements, it specifies the time, that is date and hour when the ceasefire will come into force. So it came into force in India's context on 10th of May at 5 p.m. right, or 1700 hours if you look at it militarily. Now ceasefire also identifies and defines the prohibited acts. It may identify two types of prohibited act like military, which includes acts of military violence, and even non-military actions like issuing threats of violence or even conducting a propaganda. So it might also include that you need not do military or non-military actions also. Similarly, the ceasefire agreement in most cases also delineates the physical separation of armed forces, including delineation of ceasefire line or creation of buffer zone. So suppose the end of Korean War, there was a ceasefire line that was declared known as 38th parallel, right? Now this 38th parallel serves as a border between North Korea and South Korea. Similarly, in 1972 war, 1971 war, in 1972, we signed an agreement with Pakistan known as Simla Agreement. So in that Simla Agreement also said that the fundamental delineation between the two armies of India and Pakistan will be known as line of control. What is line of control? How is it different from international border? I have uploaded a separate video in the video section. Please go and look at it. Right. So this also highlights a physical separation between these two militaries. I have given you two examples, that is between North Korea and South Korea, and the line of control that is between India and Pakistan, which was agreed to upon in 1972 as per the Simla Agreement. So this maintains the ceasefire and it tries to prevent the potential for renewed military action. So therefore, these kind of separation between these two countries are agreed upon in the ceasefire. Also, let us understand what includes in many ceasefire agreements. Suppose if two countries are signing a ceasefire agreement, it will also include a measure for verification, supervision and monitoring that can be achieved through other third parties like UN Peacekeeping Force, joint monitoring commissions, ceasefire commissions, joint commands and even civilian monitoring missions. These are not applicable in case of India and Pakistan. Also, besides these important terms, they may also include repatriation of prisoners of war. So in 1972 Simla Agreement, India agreed to hand over 93,000 prisoners of war that it had captured during the Bangladesh Liberation War. Understood? So this may also include giving away the prisoners of war or returning them to the original country. Similarly, it may also include return of the missing person like internally displaced persons and refugees. India did not agree to return the refugees, and India, even the Pakistan did not agree to take the refugees back. Similarly, it also includes restitution and compensation of claims. Suppose if one country is afraid that you have taken too much actions on us, the other country can also demand some kind of a monetary compensation from the aggressor country. This is also not applicable in India's case. So this is what a broader ceasefire looks like. It may include separation of the two countries in form of LOC, which is applicable to India. It may include time and date of start of ceasefire. It may include what actions will be prohibited after the ceasefire starts. It may include returning of prisoners of war, which we have already seen in India-Pakistani context during 1971 war. Even the countries can demand for repatriation or compensation also. Now, what happens in case you breach the ceasefire? What is breach in ceasefire? Ceasefire is stopping of all military violence, and suppose if you restart the violence, this means breach of ceasefire. Now, ceasefire in itself or even breach of ceasefire does not have any legal consequences. So, suppose if you create breach of ceasefire, you won't be punished by other important multilateral organization. But there are certain regulations or certain criterias which says that what is the criteria for breach of ceasefire, in what cases is it acceptable, in what cases it is not acceptable. And this is called as regulation respecting the law and customs of war in land, popularly called as Hague regulations, that were formulated back in 1910, even before the First World War. So let's see what this Hague regulations say about breach of ceasefire. Now, if you look at Article 36 of Hague regulation, it says that if an armistice or a ceasefire does not define its duration, then the belligerent party may resume operation at any time, provided that the enemy is warned within the time agreed upon. So suppose it says that we will have an indefinite ceasefire, which means there is no end to the ceasefire. So suppose if terrorist organization or terrorist activities happen, India can actually attack Pakistan, providing that it actually intimidates them first. Also, according to Article 40 of the Hague regulation, it speaks in case of serious breach of truce by one of the parties involved. So suppose if Pakistan or Pakistan-based terror organization, it attacks India. So does it mean India is bound by the provisions of ceasefire? The answer is no. In that case, the others have a right to denounce it, and in urgent cases, it might even recommend or recommence hostilities immediately. So in that case, suppose India and Pakistan are in ceasefire, and in tomorrow, if a terrorist organization attacks any Indian interest, Indian government will be within its right to take measures violently against Pakistan. Understood? Also, if you look at Article 41, it states that a violation of ceasefire terms by private persons acting on their own initiative, which means a private person not taking orders from other country, it authorizes that the injured party may demand the punishment of the offenders, and if necessary, even demand for compensation for the loss sustained. So it highlights that if any third party does not belonging to either one of them violates the ceasefire, in that case you can demand for punishment or you can even demand for compensation. So these are terms which you can agree upon in cases of violence of ceasefire. Understood? Now there are few questions. Sir, why is Azerbaijan backing Pakistan? The answer is religion. Well, Pradeep, that was Sunday's front page. Okay, because ceasefire happened on Saturday. So obviously the front page of Sundays, we do not cover anything on Sunday. So I thought I'll take the screenshot of that page. Okay. What is the official name of our nation, Bharat or India? Well, both. If you read at article 1st of Indian Constitution, it says India, that is Bharat, is Union of States. Good evening, Bhanu. Rishi, good evening. Well, a ceasefire is a temporary suspension of fighting, typically by a mutual agreement between conflicting parties, and may or may not lead to a formal peace treaty. This is correct. This is a temporary suspension of fighting. So, India and Pakistan did not sign a particular agreement or a formal treaty this time. It agreed that we'll stop violence against each other. So, this is a temporary suspension. Ceasefire agreements are legally binding under the international law and cannot be violated without facing sanctions by the UN Security Council. This is incorrect. I told you it does not have any legal sanctity, right? So, second statement incorrect, first one is right, option A is the right answer. Okay. Mananda, hi. Yes, Priyalata, Sheetal, Kamakshi, Amar, Tani, Bhanu, Baga, all of you are right. Okay. So let's move to the second article. Now this article appeared in the explain section of today's newspaper, and it talks about all about the loan that IMF has given to Pakistan and why latest tranche of the loan was passed. So in that regard, let us understand the context of our today's article. This article says that the executive board, what is executive board? I'll tell you, of the International Monetary Fund on Friday decided to allow for an immediate disbursement of around $1 billion loan to Pakistan, and this disbursal was a part of IMF's extended fund facility to Pakistan. Now, Pakistan in 2024 approached IMF for urgent requirement of money, saying that its economy is in very bad place and it does not even have the money to pay for its imports, right? So in that regard, IMF agreed to give loans for a 37-month duration under the account known as Extended Fund Facility, and it will provide for total amount of loan amounting to $7 billion to Pakistan. Now this loan will not be provided in one go. That means $7 billion were not transferred to Pakistani account of 2024. Rather, this money will be provided in installments, right? And before any installment, Pakistan will need to satisfy few of the conditions that have been imposed by IMF before the next installment will be provided or transferred into the Pakistani account, right? So till now, with the latest installment of $1 billion, total amount of money that has been given to Pakistan under this loan of $7 billion amounts to $2.1 billion, right? So this is the context of our today's article. Now, let us very briefly understand what is IMF. These details I have covered last week also, so I will try to go quickly through these kind of articles. The newer ones or the newer editions I have made to the slides, I will discuss them in detail, need not worry. Why I am providing you this in one notes? Because if you are downloading today's note, you need not refer to anything else as far as IMF is concerned. Okay. Now, IMF is a specialized agency of the United Nations which was set up after the Bretton Woods Conference in 1994. What are other institutions set up by Bretton Woods Conference? Let me know in the comments. Headquarters of IMF is in the capital city of US, Washington. Members of the IMF, 190 countries. And IMF, it grants loans only to its member countries. Please remember that. Now, IMF grants loan under many different categories. This time, Pakistan has been given loan under Extended Fund Facility. Similarly, few years back when Sri Lanka went to IMF, they got loan under Rapid Financing Facility and the Rapid Credit Facility. So, Rapid Financing Instrument and Rapid Credit Facility, these were the instruments under which Sri Lanka was provided loan. Pakistan is provided loan under which? Extended Fund Facility. Understood? Now, important reports that are published by IMF, we have already covered this. World Economic Outlook, Global Financial Stability Report. This is a biannual report, which means it is published twice 1 year, and this is a report which focuses on global financial markets and assesses risk to financial stability. Please remember these kind of reports. These are very important from our exams. Okay, now the newer addition to these slides. Now, IMF in general functions through 3 different organizations. That is, within IMF, working of IMF is looked after by 3 different organizations. First is known as Board of Governors. Like how RBI functions under Board of Directors of RBI, similarly there are Board of Governors under IMF, which is the highest decision making body under the IMF. Now, each member country is represented by its finance minister or the governor of its central bank, and they meet annually to review key policies and global economic challenge. Now you understand, if finance minister or central bank governor are the members of any body, they can't meet every time there is a financial situation, right? So to expedite the working or to continue working throughout the year, there is an executive board of IMF, which comprises of 24 executive directors, and this board is responsible for day-to-day operations of IMF. So even India is one of the country who nominates a executive director. Earlier, our previous CA was the executive director. Now we have removed him from the post, and the earlier CEO of Niti Aayog, Parameswaran Iyer, who also looked after the Swachh Bharat mission, he is now the executive director from India in the executive board of IMF. Understood? Third is the managing director, who is the head of IMF and its staff. Understood? So these are the three important structures that you need to remember about IMF. The loan given to Pakistan was approved by executive board because it is looking after day-to-day operations of IMF. Understood? Now let us understand how IMF operates. IMF operates based on a quota system, right, which reflects each member's relative position in the economy. So 190 members, they'll be assigned quotas based on their different capacity. And what are the criterias based on which the countries get their quota? It is determined by the size of GDP. Here GDP at market price is used, and also GDP, why is it not working, GDP at purchasing power parity use. It has 60% weightage, it has 40% weightage, and altogether GDP, it comprises 50% of the total quota allocation. Similarly, openness of the economy, which means the total amount of dollars going in and coming into the economy, it is determined by 30%, whereas the weight of economic variability is 15%. So how much your economy is volatile or how much your economy is depending on the foreign economy, it comprises of 15% of the weight, whereas your international reserve will have 5% weight in determining the quotas of the country. Now, once the quota is assigned to any country, it determines its financial contribution. As the higher the quota, higher contribution you need to make in the IMF. Similarly, it determines your voting power and access to IMF resources. So naturally, the more amount of money you give to IMF as its reserve, naturally in case of any, God forbid, BOP crisis which happens in your country, IMF will provide that much amount of money as a loan to you, right? Now quotas, they are denominated not in dollars but in SDRs, which is a unit of account. Is it a currency? The answer is no. It is not a currency, it is just a unit of account, right? World Bank and GATT, General Agreement of Tariff and Trade, which was the precursor of WTO. These three organizations, IMF, World Bank, GATT, these three were the Bretton Woods institutions. Do IMF loans have collateral also? No, they have what is known as conditionalities. Okay. Now a country's voting power, it is directly related to its quota. So higher the quota, the higher will be the voting power of the country. And here the US has the largest quota in IMF, therefore it also has the largest voting share in IMF, which is more than 15%. It is followed by Japan, China and Germany. India has 2.75% of the total quota, making it the 8th largest quota holding in the country. So what is the size of Indian economy in terms of the world? It is 4th largest. But see, in terms of quota, India is placed at 8th level or 8th rank, right? So this does not mirrors India's actual position in the global world, and this is one of the key issues that India has with multilateral organizations, that these organizations that prefer status quo, they prefer higher status to the earlier superpowers, and they do not recognize the newer and emerging powers like India, right? Now, let's talk about the extended fund facility. If you look at the IMF website, it says that EFF, it provides financial assistance to countries who are facing serious medium-term balance of payment problems because of their structural weakness. What is the structural weakness? Suppose if a country's economy is agricultural driven and not manufacturing and services driven, naturally the growth rate of that country would be low as compared to manufacturing related countries. Similarly, if a country has large portion of uneducated workforce, naturally the productivity of that country would be low. What if that country witnesses frequent natural disasters? Automatically the development levels of that country would be low. What if that country is under some kind of a ethnic or religious based conflict? Automatically the country will not be performing well economically. So these are structural weaknesses, and in that case, if the countries are facing several problems on how to pay their import and export bills, which is essentially what BOP crisis means, in that case IMF would provide you the loans under the extended fund facility. So countries that do not have enough money to pay their bills to rest of the world for goods and services that they import, in this case Pakistan, or in earlier case Sri Lanka, these countries will be eligible to get loans under the EFF. What you need to know is that assistance or the money which is given by IMF under EEF, it is in a form of loan, which means you have to return it back. It is not in a form of grant or rent, which the countries need not return back. So please remember, this is a loan which the country needs to return back, and the term extended here means that these countries need more time than usual to pay back the money, because they need to bring about structural changes in the economy. Now India in 1991 also faced BOP crisis, and this was also because of structural problem. Why? India at that time had a very closed economy. It was not very well versed or liberal economy. So IMF said that please undertake structural changes in your economy, open up your economy, make your currency market driven, and in that case take time, use this money, and then return us back the loan. So this was how the structural changes is what determines whether the country would get loans or not. Now, what you need to understand, how has Pakistan become eligible for the loans under EEF? Now, Pakistan total GDP has been stagnant over the past decade. It was $338 billion in 2023, and it is lower than what it was in 2017. While the growth in Pakistan has stagnated, on the other hand, inflation has soared. How much inflation is there in Pakistan? In 2024, it was 23.4%. So in case of India, you understand, if it goes beyond 6%, automatically people make so much noise that महंगाई बढ़ गई है, महंगाई मर रही है. And think about Pakistan not growing GDP wise or growth wise, and having such a high amount of inflation. Now, in other words, a basket of goods which costed in Pakistan average in 2019 at rupees 100, now it would have become 215 by the end of 2024. So this is the amount of inflation that is going on in Pakistan. So because of these crises, Pakistan faced a lot of problems. Pakistan, being an import dependent country, does not grow the amount of food that it consumes. It does not have the petroleum reserves, or even if it has petroleum reserves, it does not have financial and technological means to extract them. So in that case, in terms of fuel requirement, in terms of food requirement, Pakistan is dependent on imports. Similarly, Pakistan does not have a very good defense industry, but it has to get at par with India, so it needs a big expenditure spending, particularly in defense sector. And where does Pakistan get its equipment from other countries? So in that case, Pakistan needs to import a lot, but does it have the sizable foreign exchange reserve? Does it have the economic wares and means to return the money back? The answer is no. So that is why Pakistan approached for the loan. Now, in light of Pakistan's military escalation against India, New Delhi conveyed its very strong dissent to IMF decision of providing the loan. Now, many argued that why did India abstain from the loan? Why did India reject the loan or reject the voting? Now, what you need to understand, India abstained from voting in the meeting because there is no option for the member countries to vote against such a decision. So, therefore, India did what it could have done, that it abstained from the voting, and it highlighted to IMF by submitting a formal report that the track record of Pakistan in using these funds are actually not good, because there is a possibility that Pakistan is using this money to perpetrate cross-border terrorism in India. So this was the cause of concern for Pakistan, but IMF realized, and many foreign powers including US realized, that if Pakistan goes under the weather, it will make India too strong, and therefore they did not allow to do that, because nobody wants a country to go strong. Similarly, it is only us who want India to be strong, right? So that is why they agreed to the loan. Sheetal, good evening. Now let's see if you are able to solve this question. This is a PYQ of 2014. Very straightforward, you should solve it. Good evening, Sheetal. Happy Budh Purnima to you. Yes, IMF is the right answer. This one also IMF, okay? This one. Why was this question asked in 2022? Because in 2021, Sri Lanka approached IMF for loans, and IMF provided Sri Lanka the loans under rapid credit and rapid financing instruments. So IMF was also the right answer. Now IMF, World Bank, other Bretton Woods institution we cover in detail in our foundation batch classes. Right now, May evening batch, the admission to May evening batch is ongoing, and it will close on 15th of May, right? What you need to do if you want to take admissions to April evening batch, go to our website. Right, when you go to our website, you need to create an account, and after that you can click on explore courses. Suppose if you want to get classes exclusively in English language, then what you need to do is click on UPSC IS English tab here, and the first tile here is the tile which you need to click in order to get admissions in the May evening batch. Right now, the diamond batch is applicable or available at 39,499 rupees. But let me tell you a way where you can get discounts even on this amount, right? How to get discounts? Click on buy now. Here, you'd have an option to add promo code. Click here and write ATS live. Click apply. When you click on apply, see the discount of 7,000 rupees is applicable, and now the diamond course is available at 32,499. Similarly, platinum is at 27,500 and gold is at 16,999. My recommendation to you is take diamond batches. Why? Because if you look from this slide, all the benefits of StudyIQ platform is available in diamond batches, whereas only some benefits are available for gold and platinum, not all. Right? So please take admissions, whatever batch you want to feel like. My recommendation is diamond batches. Okay. Now let us get back to the next article. This talks about why farmers prefer rice and wheat. So most of you who attend the classes regularly, you'll say that obvious reason is, sir, minimum support price is why farmers opt for rice and wheat. But I'll tell you that rice and wheat isn't the only crop that farmers offer or the government offers MSP for. Government offers MSP for as many as 22 crops. So why do farmers prefer rice and wheat instead of growing sugarcane, instead of growing pulses, instead of growing grams, instead of growing cotton, right? So in that case, let me give you a detail. Now you understand, if you take any economic activity, what is your primary motive? Your primary motive is to make money, right? So farmers also, they are also like businessmen, and they are very rational and risk averse. So everything else be same, they'll choose to grow the crops that offer reasonable prices, as well as the productivity of these crops are quite decent. So these are the two conditions based on which farmers make their decision. Therefore, rice and wheat are the most preferred crops by farmers because they have access to basic irrigation, which will supplement the natural rainfall. So this is the primary case. But what are the other cases? Let me tell you in this today's discussion. Now, why are we telling you that farmers are preferring rice and wheat? Because if you see from the data from Telangana, from Punjab, you will see that the area under which the rice has been planted has increased in the last 10 years. That is between 2015 till 2025. Similarly, areas under rice and wheat, it also increased in Madhya Pradesh. What is the other crops of Madhya Pradesh? Important crops. They grow soybean, right? So wheat and rice instead of soybean have gone up from these many hectares in the last 10 years, even in Madhya Pradesh. So we are talking about 3 primary grown states where rice and wheat are grown. Now this mirrors not just in these 3 states but also in other states. That is, this trend is actually prevailing. So let us understand the reasons why farmers are preferring rice and wheat. First, obviously, is that the government, although it offers MSP for 22 crops, but most of the procurement of government and its government related agencies like NAFED, like NCCF, in terms of MSP, it is done majorly for 2 crops, that is rice and wheat. So one of the reasons is that it is almost guaranteed that in case you're growing rice and wheat and it is of decent qualities, the government and its agencies will buy it from you and offer you the money, that is MSP, which might be more than the prevailing market prices. So one reason, the most obvious reason, is MSP, but there are other reasons also. The another reason is that the yield risk in cases of rice and wheat is quite less. What is yield risk? That is, you are growing large amount of crops and the risk that might reduce your yield are quite less in cases of rice and wheat. Now it is also receiving priority when it comes to public breeding and research support. Therefore, this is also the reason, and let me give you certain examples. Let us consider wheat first. Now traditional tall varieties of wheat which existed in 1950s and 1960s, it yielded only about 1 to 1.5 tons of grain per hectare. So this is wheat we are talking about. Now you understand, in 1960s, one major development happened in case of India, that started in 1966, that was called as Green Revolution, right? Now what happened in Green Revolution, that government introduced what is known as high yielding variety of seeds. Obviously, these high yielding variety of seeds would mean that if you grow these seeds, automatically your yield of wheat will be quite high. So with first generation of Green Revolution, wheat varieties such as Kalyan, Sona and Sonalika were introduced. Please remember these names. These are the variants of wheat that were introduced, and these were high yielding varieties of wheat. Now it released in late 1960s and it yielded an average of 3.8 tons of grains per hectare. Compare this to the traditional varieties which gave 1 to 1.5 tons of per hectare of wheat, right? So therefore automatically it increased your yield about 3 times, right? Therefore, this was the normal conditions under which the farmers were growing, and their yield increased by 3 times in late 1960s only. Now going forward, government made many changes to the varieties, and recently an HD 3385 variety was released in 2023 and it yields an average of 6 tons per hectare and it has a potential of going to 7.3 tons in the ideal conditions. Also, not just the yields are high, but this variant is also resistant to all major rust that can affect the wheat crop, that is yellow rust, black rust or brown rust. Similarly, it can also be sown early as compared to the traditional varieties of wheat, which means you can sow it on October 15th also, as well as you can even sow them at normal time and late time. And what advantage does this crop has over traditional circumstances? Because it can be sown early. So in case if you are sowing the wheat early, naturally the harvest time of the wheat will also be pushed early, which will mean that the chances that your crop will be under heat wave also reduces, right? So this is one of the key benefits of it. Also, now let us consider rice. Now the traditional tall varieties of rice, it produced about 1 to 3 tons per hectare of paddy, right? Now this took about 160 to 180 days for the crops to mature, right? That is from sowing the seeds to grain harvesting. It took about more than 5 to 6 months of period, right? Now the IR8, which was the first ever semi-drought variety of rice introduced in late 1996, it yielded how much? 4.5 to 5 tons, and it took just 130 days to achieve this kind of yield. So not just the time taken for the crop reduced, but also the yields increased. Similarly, Samba Masuri, which is known as BPT 5204, which was released in 1986, it gave an average of how much? 4.5 tons with the potential to go about 6.5 tons of yield. You understand how government has made an effort to increase the yield. And earlier this month, which we have already discussed, but I am summarizing it today also, that Indian Council of Agricultural Research, it introduced a genetically edited mutant variant of Samba Masuri, which is developed by editing a gene that suppresses cytokinin levels in rice. Now, cytokinin levels in rice is very important because it is a plant hormone that helps in increase of number of grains per acre, right? So, number of grains is increased by cytokinin, and a gene which suppressed this cytokinin levels in rice, it was removed from the original crop, and scientists basically use CRISPR-Cas9 technique to achieve this, which cut and modify DNA sequences, that is GN1A gene, and this GN1A gene was the one that suppressed the cytokinin level. So by reducing this particular cytokinin suppressing initiative, this new mutant was born known as Kamala, which produces about 450 to 500 grains per panicle as compared to 200 to 250 grains per parent Samba Masuri. One panicle is the one strand of the paddy crop, right? Now it resulted into higher average as well as potential yield, which means yield has increased to 5.37 tons and a potential has increased to 9 tons per hectare. Similarly, some Kamla matures in 130 days, which is 15 to 20 days earlier than the Samba Masuri crop, which means lower duration translates automatically into savings of your water requirement. Also, Kamla variant has more root biomass area, which enhances the plant's ability to mobilize available nutrients like phosphorus, nitrogen from the soil, and therefore when it is mobilizing higher amount of nutrients from the soil, automatically the requirement of fertilizers will reduce. Understood? So these are the benefits of how genetically editing can help your crops level. Now, scientists have also edited or used CRISPR-Cas9 technology similarly to edit what is known as drought and salt tolerance gene in the crop variety. Now, this crop variety we are talking about is Cotton Dora Sanulu. Now, DST gene, which acts as a negative regulator, and it inhibits the rice's plant's ability to become tolerant to abiotic stresses like heat and salinity. So it reduces the expression of this particular strand by editing, that makes cultivation of this particular crop that is GM mutant line of this variety. It is known as Pusa DST1 rice, which we have already covered, and therefore this crop becomes viable to be grown under conditions where water stresses or salinized stresses are there on the plants. So therefore we are using CRISPR-Cas9, that is a gene editing technology, to make crops more durable when it comes to water stresses, make crops more durable to the amount of salt in water. So therefore these are the benefits that is given. In short, what we require is a continuous breeding program or improvements in rice and wheat, and it has increased the attractiveness of the rice and wheat because it focuses on raising yields, it makes the crops resistant to disease and pest, it improves the resilience of the crops to abiotic stresses like drought, like salinity, and even extreme temperatures. Similarly, it lowers the maturity period, which reduces your fertilizer requirement, which reduces your water and irrigation requirement, and therefore it reduces your input cost. So therefore these are the reasons why farmers are preferring these kinds of crops, and this is in addition to the assured MSP procurement and access to irrigation facilities, which is already benefiting the farmers. Understood? Now, what about yields of other crops like oilseeds, like pulses, like other field crops? They have registered flat or even a modest increase in this yield, which is against the yields which we have seen in cases of rice and wheat. Rices and wheat, their yields have grown multiple times over decades, whereas the yields of these crops, which are also important crops, they have remained stagnated, or even if they have increased, they have been very modest. Now, for example, there are hybrids today in cases of rice and wheat, which gives about 10 tons per hectare yield, and this is achieved within 120 to 125 days. Now, with direct seeding technology, which is a technology used for rice, it requires no nursery sowings of paddy crop, transplantation of seeding and flooding of fields. So all of this is not required. Therefore, you save on cost, you save on inputs, you save on water, and you save on labor. Right, so direct seeding technology is a technology used for growing rice, where you need not nurture the saplings in nursery, you need not conduct transplantation, and you need not even undertake floodings of the field before transplanting the seeds. Right. Now, other crops, they haven't received the same extent of agricultural research and development support. Therefore, you have seen that India, although have approved genetically modified BT cotton, but no improvement has been done. Therefore, these crops have become actually not so very well off when it comes to resistance of pests like bollworm pest. Similarly, no new GM event has been done. Therefore, many government agencies, they brought GM mustard, they brought brinjal, but these were not approved by the government. Therefore, commercial cultivation of these GM varieties have not been approved, whereas new GM cotton is concerned, new GM mustard or brinjal is concerned. So because of these factors, the overall productivity of these crops remain low, whereas continuous improvement due to genetically editing when it comes to rice and wheat has resulted into increase in yield manifold. Understood? Now let's see if you are able to solve this particular question. Well, gene editing is a foolproof technology because you are not introducing any foreign body into your organism, right? Which isn't the case with GM. Yes, Ballguard 1 and Ballguard 2 technologies are mentioned in context of what? BT cotton, right? So it is a developing genetically modified cotton crop. Now let's move on to the next article. It talks about Nipah virus because a 42-year-old woman in Kerala has tested positive for Nipah virus. So in that regard, let us understand Nipah virus. Now this I have borrowed from Friday or Saturday's newspaper, need not worry, because we did not have a session on Saturday, right? So in this regard, let us talk about the zoonotic virus which has a high mortality ratio known as Nipah. Now, Nipah is a single-stranded enclosed negative sense of RNA virus. Now, RNA virus are single-stranded. These are complementary. So, either it can be positive sense or it can be negative sense. Nipah virus is a negative sense. What does negative sense mean? Not important from our exam. Just remember, Nipah virus is a negative sense. And what kind of virus? RNA virus. Now, the origin of Nipah, it emerged in 1999 among Malaysia's pig farmers, and it was detected in the subcontinent in Bangladesh and in eastern India in 2001. Now, traces of this disease earlier was found in Cambodia, Ghana and Thailand also, right? So, this was the origin and spread of the virus. Now, the transmission of virus, Nipah virus is a zoonotic disease. That means originally it occurred in animals, and from that it transmitted into human beings which are in direct contact with the infected animals, especially pigs and bats, right? Now, Nipah virus infection can also be transmitted either by consuming contaminated food or directly from person to person also. So, it means animal to person contamination happens, person to person contamination happens, and even if you have contaminated food, then also the virus actually can transmit. Now, the natural reservoirs of the Nipah virus is actually fruit bats, who are also known as flying foxes, and they are believed to be the natural reservoir or primary carriers of the Nipah viruses. Now, this is the image which will help you understand how the viruses get transmitted. The natural host of the virus is fruit bat. They can consume a fruit which might be eaten by the bat, and if you eat that fruit, automatically you will get the virus. Similarly, it transmits even through pigs. That is, one human can get infected because of its proximity with pigs, and other humans can also get the disease from the humans, right? So, this is how the Nipah virus gets transmitted. Now, for testing of Nipah virus, different kind of testing techniques are used. That is RT-PCR, very much in use during COVID-19 pandemic. This is called as reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction. Similarly, IHC, ELISA, SNT also are used in the test of Nipah virus. What you need to remember is the full form of these virus, known as the virus neutralization test in some context. Okay, so please remember the names, what you need to understand. Now, let us understand the symptoms of this virus. Now, human infection presents an encephalitic syndrome. What is an encephalitic syndrome? It is a medical condition which characterizes with inflammation in your nervous system or in your brain, right? Now, initial signs that you have gotten Nipah virus is that fever, headache, muscle ache, nausea and sore throat might happen. If it progresses, it may lead to dizziness, drowsiness, neurological signs of encephalitis, that is memory loss, etc. Similarly, in severe cases, the human may get seizures, within 24 to 48 hours of contamination. Now, in severe varieties, mild to severe illness, including brain swelling and possible death might also occur. Similarly, pigs also show various symptoms like common symptom includes chronic cough, often referred to as barking pig syndrome. Pigs may also show symptoms like shivering and seizures, and this disease rapidly spreads among pigs. Therefore, in addition to bats, pigs are also known as an important carrier of Nipah virus. Now, let's see what are the treatments that are available in case of Nipah. Now, there is no specific treatment or vaccine which are currently available in case of Nipah. Ribavirin, which is an antiviral, might help in reducing the mortalities in cases of encephalitis case, and treatment, it focuses on intensive support care and symptoms management. So, these you need to take care of in cases of Nipah, because no specific treatment or vaccine is currently available. Now, let's see if you are able to solve this particular question. Well, office data, I forgot your name. She told me her name, I forgot the name. Okay, Tara. Now I'll remember the name. Rodents are primarily natural reservoir of the Nipah virus. Incorrect. Who are the primary reservoir? Bats, fruit bats especially. Human to human transmission has not been reported. Again incorrect. There is currently no licensed vaccine or specific antiviral treatment available for Nipah virus infection. Third is correct. First and second aren't. So therefore option B is the right answer. Most of you have gotten this right only. Yes. Tara, option B is the right answer. Sheetal, Vishwajit, Bhanu, Priyalata, Sarang, Bhaga, all of you are right. Now, Turkish Dawn, this is almost 4:55. Let us take these articles tomorrow, okay? I'll do these two articles quickly tomorrow, okay? So, with this, let's end our today's session. I'll see you again tomorrow at 4. Until then, please have a very good evening and good night. And now that the war and the chances of war has subsided, let's more focus on our studies, okay? Because this automatically will eat our time and no particular benefit to us, okay?